A little bit of YouTube to get us started as we're going to be talking about how to live out of the greatness and unique strengths God has hardwired into our lives. So if you've ever wondered what kind of value or unique contributions you bring into the world, you are in the right place, so stick around. Hey, I'm Eric, and we're super excited that you are joining us today. Whether you're sitting in front of a device or in a coffee shop, maybe even a bar, we just want to say thank you for tuning in, and we would love to hear from you. Best way to do that is to scan the QR code or to fill out the form next to the stream and take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself. And if it's your first time with us, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send a little gift in the mail to you in the coming week as our way of saying thank you for joining us today. Now, as you're filling that out, there's a lot going on and some really cool ways for you to connect over these next couple of weeks. First, we've got our baby child dedications coming up on May 18th and 21st and all of our weekend services. If you'd like to find out more about participating in this amazing moment here at Crosspoint for you and your family, just again scan the QR code or let us know on your connection card. Second, we're doing something as a community that we think is an amazing way to serve the underserved and the overlooked in our community through one of our missional partners, Wrapped in Love. If you'd like to take a look at the donation list, check out this QR code and also take a look at the Wrapped in Love story over at our YouTube channel and how you are part of Chloe's amazing story and her passion in serving this overlooked and underserved community. Last, in case you haven't noticed, we like to say that we don't take ourselves too seriously, and what better way to do that by enjoying a night of fun and laughs. We want to invite you to the Scott Long comedy show here at the Crosspoint venue, benefiting Best Buddies and Unified Sports at both Hamilton Southeastern and Fishers High Schools, two of our local high schools. It's going to be a great night for a great cause with some great laughs, and you can check it all out by going to the QR code for details and to purchase tickets. All right, we got a great service today. We're going to be looking at the unique superpower that you bring into the world. And believe it or not, we all have them. Unique strengths and talents that not only bring out the best in us, but also bring the best of us to those around us. So to get us started, let's take a look at this superhero as he's trying to better understand his superpowers.
Oh man, what a great scene from everybody's neighborhood, friendly Spider-Man Homecoming. He's trying to figure out his superpowers. I mean, he's just new to this whole deal. He's trying to figure out, what his strengths are, and he's full of ambition, full of intention, good intention, and he has a lot of fumbles, a lot of moments, a lot of mishaps, a lot of moments where he is not operating out of an awareness of what he uniquely brings to the superhero world. And one of the things we see in Spider-Man is he is on this journey of self-awareness. He's on this journey of discovering what he is and who the future him is going to be, which is the journey that we're all on right now. And, I hope that this brings you some encouragement as you see movies like this and you see that, he starts here. And if you're familiar at all with the Spider-Man franchise, one franchise movie later in Spider-Man No Way Home, he actually at the end of that movie, he gets his kind of purpose. He really sees, I actually do have gifts. He gets this just drop killer line that I'm going to show you here in a moment from his aunt and his Uncle Ben. And I'm going to kind of spoil that movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it. I think it's like 2 years old, all right? And so don't go home and go oh man, I was going to watch that tonight. All right, I was going to go by Blockbuster, pick it up on the way home. All right, I don't even know what to do if you haven't seen it. All right, but he drops this line, or is given this line at the end of the next movie where he's developed his strengths. He's developed some of these things that has been hardwired in him to bring to the world. And he's told, with great power comes great responsibility. With great power. He's got amazing gifts and special powers that has been instilled within him. And not only does great responsibility come with that, but also great opportunity. And so today we're going to look at that. We're going to look at how we continue this kind of journey of self-awareness, of becoming the future you that you want to be. And I just really think actually self-awareness is a pathway toward that future you. In fact, I would argue that the self-awareness is the foundation of becoming the future you that you want to become. So welcome to Crosspoint. Man, excited to have you guys here. You guys excited to be here today? So excited to have you here today. My name's Kurt. If we haven't had a chance to meet, it's great to meet you. Great to have you for the first time. If you're here for the first time, well, it's the first of many times. How about our friends online? Let's make some noise to those tuning in the online spaces all across the city, our state, our nation. Great to have you with us today. And just a quick recap on what we've talked about so far. We said, right now is the you now. And you are on a journey toward the future you. And so we're all kind of asking the question, how do I get to the you that I want to be, the you that I'm designed to be? And one of the things we looked at last weekend is we said, you're never going to become the man or the woman or the student that you are to be until, just on accident. I mean, it takes some very intentional steps to actually become the future you that you're created to be and that you want to be. And so every single day, you're making decisions and you're either getting closer and closer to that future you, or you're taking steps further and further away from that future you. And so, every decision we make is a pathway. And so today, we're going to talk about how to live out of the unique gifts, the unique talents that God has hardwired into us, your superpowers, if you will. Maybe not in the superhero realm, but you actually have things that are hardwired into you. And whether you believe that or not, really, again, comes back to a couple questions that we dove into in the first week, where we said, what do I actually believe about the person of God, the person of Jesus? Because how we answer that's going to dictate, how what we believe about ourselves. And then the kind of second question, what do I believe God believes about me? And these questions kind of lead us to even a deeper question, which is this one right here. Do I actually believe that God designed me on purpose and that I have unique contributions to bring into the world? And, did God actually have a plan for me? Did he uniquely wire things into me that I'm to bring to the people in my life, the people in my spheres of influence, the workspaces, the school spaces that I interact with every single day? And as we think about this, this really kind of raises some questions of identity. Who am I? And, who am I called to be? And one of the things that I heard a number of years ago that's really helped me about, with understanding identity, and is this phrase right here. And I couldn't even tell you where I heard it from, but it's one of the most powerful phrases. I can't tell you who said it. But it's this right here, that our identity is best when it's ascribed to us. As we think about our identities, we think about, what am I living now? What do I believe about myself? So many times we want to kind of set our own identity. We say, well, I'm going to determine who I am, and I'm going to tell myself that you're this. And we realize that there's, some element that we can do that, but there's a lot of holes in that. Because we're broken, and we don't fully see the full potential of who God sees us as. So then oftentimes we'll kind of swing the other way and we'll say, well, I'm going to let other people tell me who I am. I'm going to let, people in my life, friends, family. And again, there's all kinds of holes with that, because we often are kind of given an identity that maybe isn't who we are, but it's who others want us to be. And so I want us to really consider the third and most brilliant option, which is, what if we look to our Creator? What if we look to the Creator who actually designed us and allow him to tell us, okay, here's who you are? Because I really believe that we're at our best when our identity is ascribed to us. So I want to take us back all the way to the beginning of creation and kind of look at the beginnings of your and my identity. And to do this, we're going to go back to the first book in the Bible called Genesis. It's kind of the story of creation at the very beginning. And in this story, we see just the beauty and the serenity and the goodness of things that God had created. And we find God created everything in the world, and he intended really good things for it. And in this story, in this narrative, if you will, the first 3 days we see God separating things in the creation narrative. He's separating, like light from darkness, and he's separating sky from land and creating land, and then he's separating waters from dry land. And then the next 3 days he begins populating, this thing that he's created. And populating, meaning he begins to create plants and grains and fruits, and then he puts, fish in the sea and beasts in the field, and there's lions, tigers, and bears. Yeah, and then on the sixth day is like his crown creation. This is where he actually creates his gem, and this is where you're created. This is where I'm created. This is where humankind comes into existence. In fact, here's what Genesis 1 tells us. It says, so God created humankind in his image. I mean, that phrase right there is just loaded right there. Just think about that for a moment. In the image of God, he created them. So Moses, who's writing this, just reiterates the very first thing he said. He's like, I don't want you to miss this. He says, male and female, he created them. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed, he says, it was, look at this, very good. What he's saying right there, he's saying, you are actually very good. You are very good. He said, when I began to think about you, dream about you, plan for you, he said, I just had goodness in mind. And I actually created with you with a plan. I created you with a purpose, and I hardwired greatness into you, that there are certain things you would uniquely bring to the world. Now, if we fast forward, a couple hundred years, thousands of years forward, we later find in the first century a guy by the name of the Apostle Paul. And the Apostle Paul, he's a guy we like to talk about a lot around here. He's a perfect example of how God hardwires things into us from the very beginning, even before we take steps of faith. Even before we take steps to even, pursue or know who Jesus is. And we see this with Paul. In fact, Paul, in his early days, he's like a bad dude, right? Not like a bad dude, like, hey, that's a cool guy to hang out with. I mean, I'm not talking bad, like vile, just had a lot of destruction coming out of his life. And in the early days of his life, he's known as Saul. And then his name gets changed later. But Saul, in his early days, he was stubborn. He was hardwired to be single-minded and driven and fanatical, and he would use all these things that are hardwired into his life to basically actually come against the creator of the universe, to come against Jesus. He hated Christians. He was actually against followers of Jesus. And then one day he changed his mind. In fact, one day he came to this place where he had an encounter with Jesus and actually saw the real Jesus and the person that he is. He's like, oh my gosh, you're actually somebody entirely different than I thought you were. And he begins to follow Jesus. He used to be against him, he begins to follow him. And if you were like a friend of Saul's, you'd probably go, whoa, wait a second, dude. Like, I thought you were like against this guy. Now you're for him. Like, are you flipping and flopping? He'd go, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. He's like, I came into some new information. I had a whole new experience, and now I was totally wrong. I've changed my mind. And so he begins to go, just all in on following Jesus. And it's interesting because, when we take that step, our identity changes. We begin to become known as a child, a son or daughter of God. But what's really crazy is it doesn't change our talents that are woven into us from the very beginning. In fact, Paul, even after he takes this step, he's still stubborn. He's still single-minded. He's still, fanatical and driven, has this high command. But now, instead of coming against, the creator of the universe, he's actually helping people find their way to Jesus. He's actually using his talents, these things that have been hardwired into him, to actually, instead of create harm, to actually help heaven be more crowded one day. He's like, I want to help people experience the same Jesus that I've come to experience. And this is kind of a fundamental building block of this whole idea of talents and strengths and the superpower, these things that God just hardwires into us from the very beginning. In fact, here's one of the things Paul says about this when he's writing these letters later on. He says, now there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. Variety of talents, gifts, strengths, but the same Spirit, meaning they come from the same God. And there's a varieties of service, like different ways to serve and for these to be implemented, but they come from the same Lord. There are varieties of activities, meaning ways that you can express yourself, bring value to the world, but it is the same God who look at this, empowers them all in, and who does he empower them in? He says right here, everyone. He says every single one of us. Which is crazy, because what that shows us is that God actually, from the beginning, hardwires certain gifts, talents, strengths into your life that he intends for you to not only bring to the world, but for you to live out of, to experience the best future you can be. In fact, this is probably one of the reasons that, a lot of times we spend time thinking about this. You've probably spent some time thinking, at some point, gosh, what am I good at? Am I good at this? Am I good at that? I feel like I'm not good at this. We kind of self-assess ourselves. It's probably one of the reasons that if you've been in an interview, the two most common questions in interviews are, what are your greatest strengths? And then also, what do you consider to be your weaknesses, right? And these both make sense. I mean, I've been on both sides of the interview table, but this makes total sense. Sometimes we're like, gosh, why do I have to talk about my weaknesses, right? Well, it's not because we just want to hear what we're bad at or that we're not strong at, but there's an element of self-awareness in this. I want to know, does this person understand not only what they bring of value to the world, but do they understand their limitations? Now, we've all probably had like a canned answer to that, right? Somebody's like, what are your weaknesses? And you're like, oh, my weaknesses, I just care too much. I think I work too hard, and I expect too much out of people, And they're like, man, you are higher. That's the kind of person we love. Everybody loves that kind of person. That's like the canned response, right? That's the response we're supposed to give. But today, I want you to ask yourself these questions. I want you to just be honest with yourself. Do you know what strengths you bring into the world? Do you know what talents have been hardwired into you? All right, do you know where perhaps you're not as strong? What are some of the places where you say, yeah, that's just not a strength of mine? And here's the bigger question. You probably are very, very aware of the places that you don't perform as well. But let me ask you this. How intimate are you with your strengths? How intimate are you with the things that you do bring value on? Because see, herein lies the problem, I think, in us continuing to accomplish the future you that we want to be. And that is that, for most of us, we naturally focus on our limitations and our weaknesses instead of living and leading out of our strengths. And why is that? Well, there's a number of studies that have been done on this. In fact, in 2016, there was a study that said that, basically that people perceive their weaknesses as more malleable than their strengths. And more flexible, that's the area where I can grow the most, which actually isn't true. We think, gosh, if I've got an area of weakness, I've really got to ramp that part of my life up. It's interesting. A number of years ago, Tiger Woods, one of the greatest golfers who's ever played on the tour, there's a conversation between him and his coach where he recognized one of my limitations is I don't play well out of the sand traps. I'm horrible out of the sand. And so he said to his coach, I want to become excellent out of the sand. And Tiger's strengths are his incredible ability to just kill the ball, hit the ball long, far, and incredibly accurate. And yet he was accurate. He said, my game out of the sand is not strong. His coach said something really interesting to him. He said, hey, we could spend a lot of time working on this area where you're not overly strong. And yes, we don't want it to be such a deficit that it prevents you, it takes you out of tournaments because it's such a glaring hole. But at the same time, you only have a certain margin of increase in your area of weakness. He says, how about instead of making you excellent out of the sand, we build on your strengths and we just increase your long game and your accurate game so you don't get in the sand. And see, this is where we excel. This is where we excel. But we think, gosh, those areas of weakness, that's where I'm most flexible and pliable and can make the most impact, but it's not actually accurate. There's other data out there that says, for many of us, think about this, many of us, we actually we have a fear of our weaknesses, and that fear actually overshadows our confidence in our strengths. Think about that. Sometimes we're so concerned about the areas where we aren't strong that it actually creates a fear that overshadows the areas where we do bring a strength. And in fact, if we just simplify that phrase right there, this is really just an issue of fear overshadowing confidence. And it's interesting because, Paul, again, the Apostle Paul says something about this. He says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind or of confidence. And yet, let's be honest, most of us probably pay more attention to the things we're not good at than the things that we are, right? Myself included. In fact, last weekend, just case in point, this is a really cool moment last weekend. If you were with us, if not, I'm going to show it to you, where we were talking about how small things over time make a big difference, can actually have compound interest and build up to have some pretty big affect. We can do small things over time, and over time, those can take down some pretty big giants in our life if we stick to it, if we put it in our life, if we just continue, these small little habits over time. And we kind of illustrated this with a domino set that our production team had built throughout the week. And we showed, that just a small little domino like this, while it maybe can't make a massive impact, when it's compounded over time with habits and rhythms and sticking to things over time, it creates momentum, and those things can take pretty big things down. In fact, here was kind of the illustration right here. If you missed it last weekend, take a look. Isn't that amazing? Just the visual of that I can actually do small things over time, and it can actually take down big giants in my life. Now, here's what was fascinating about last weekend. You would not have seen this unless you were here, part of our early weekend service, which is our capture service, where I was kind of illustrating that, if this is the future you, and you just begin to develop small habits in your life, I started throwing this at the big, 5-foot domino just to show that, like, if you just say, hey, I'm going to do something once or twice or over a short period of time, and I try to knock this giant down in my life, it has no affect. I mean, that domino doesn't move at all, that big one, all right? But it's only over time, one thing building on another that actually allows us to take those big things down. So that was the point, and I kept, illustrating this. So the very first time that I kind of illustrated this, and I got ready to throw this domino at the big domino at the end, and I'd done this like 20 times, like that day, by the way. I just like whiffed. I threw the domino, and it just went sailing right into the front row. I mean, I was just like, oh my gosh, you can see it on my mind. I mean, like, oh, okay, so what? I just blew the illustration right there. And I was like a pitcher, in high school. I mean, it's not like I don't know how to throw, but it's just like in that moment, I just like missed it. And see, this is the power of post-production right here. Because see, when everything went online, I just said to our production team, hey, can you take that out and make it look really good for me and make it look like I didn't miss? And they did. In fact, they covered it up, and you would have never known unless you were here that, last Thursday night and you saw this happen, which it kind of illustrates what we do in our lives, right? Anytime we have a weakness or miss or something that shows some kind of limitation, we want to cover it up. When actually there's some things to be learned there, and it's not like we need to celebrate it, but there's an awareness that, okay, that it's okay to have a weakness. It's okay to have a moment like that. It's okay to not be good at everything. Perhaps you've been at a party where, you were hanging out with friends and had a great time at the party and made all kinds of connects and enjoyed yourself, and you get in the car to go home at the end of the night, and on your way home, I mean, all you can think about is that one tiny little moment, that tiny little conversation or that awkward moment that you had where something came out and you put your foot in your mouth. Even though the whole evening was amazing, all you could focus on was that one moment where you actually kind of didn't do what you wanted to do, where you showed a sense of weakness. It's probably not a surprise, but we have a fixation with the areas in our life where we have weakness. And I think it's actually kind of been built into us. I think it's actually kind of been deeply rooted for many of us in our upbringing. It's been deeply rooted in even our education growing up. In fact, parents were studied a number of years ago and asked this question. They said, hey, if your student brought these grades right here home, an A in English, an A in social studies, a C in biology, and an F in algebra, here's the question they asked them. Which of these grades would you spend the most time discussing with your son or daughter? Now, you can look at that, and you can probably predict like which grades, research showed would be most discussed, right? And so English, parents said about 6% of parents said, hey, that's the one, the A in English, that's the one we'd talk about the most. Ironically, it's interesting, social studies, same grade, only 1% of parents said they'd talk about that one. Biology, it went up to 18%. You're like, yeah, that seems logical because that's, they're kind of in the middle of the road there. But look at this, algebra, 75% of parents said that's what we talk about the most. And obviously, if your child's failing, you're like, we're going to have a conversation. We want to make sure they're not like failing school because they're so struggling in this area right here. But the researchers carefully crafted this question right here. They said, which of these grades would you spend the most time talking about? See, this is what happens. We naturally gravitate toward our areas of weakness. And as a result, our fear, it overshadows our confidence. But what if, just imagine for a moment, what if our confidence could overshadow our fear? Because there's actually some pretty amazing data on this. In fact, Gallup Research Group, they actually have reported through research that when you begin to live out of the confidence of what you do well, you're actually 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life. And you're 6 times as likely to actually be engaged in your work. In fact, Psychology Today, they actually listed 10 things. They said there are actually 10 things that happen when you live out of the things that you uniquely are wired to bring into the world. In fact, here's what they said. When we focus on our strengths, we're happier, we experience less stress, we feel healthier, we have more energy, we feel more satisfied with our lives, we're more confident, experience faster growth and development, we're more creative and agile at work, experience more meaning in our work, and are more engaged in our work. And I think those are all things we want, right? So the question is like, how do we do this? Like, how do we create this? Well, I believe knowledge is power, and I believe self-awareness is actually the pathway to the future you. And so if that's the best pathway to the future you, then I think we have to be aware of our weaknesses, but I think we have to get very, very intimate with our strengths. So I want to help us do that here today. So we're going to bring one of our strengths coach, our certified strength coach, to talk about this a little bit with us, which just happens to also be my wife, Julie. Let's welcome my wife, Julie, up here to the platform with us today.
The music, turn down the lights.
So good to have you.
Got a feeling I'm gonna be alright, okay, alright. It's about damn time.
All right, so if you don't have never met my wife, this comes very natural doing strength coaching. She's now you're now certified in this, have been. But this is a part of your life. Like you're a coach professionally with educators, but it's not just what you do for work. This is also what you do in our family. You did this at Crosspoint for years with our kids' environments, with, for our leaders. I mean, all around. You are a coach. Why do you have such a high belief in strengths? I mean, tell us about your journey to getting to why you've so built into these.
Well, just as you talked about, my whole life, I guess I feel like people need to be seen and heard. I've always felt that way. I think that's why I love what I do in my day-to-day work. And so, gosh, it was like 3 years ago, one of our administrators came to our administrative team and said, hey, I'd love for us to do this strengths assessment because I really think it could help us work more effectively as a team. So I was like, sure. Because Kurt and I have taken lots of assessments.
Lots of assessments.
Yes, I feel like short of them doing like a blood sample, like I feel like I have been told all the things I'm good at and all the things I'm not so good at. So I was like, yeah, and I'm pretty sure I know how this is going to come out. And so I went ahead and took the assessment, and I was like so surprised at how I felt differently with this assessment, not because it can't be paired with others, but after taking it, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is like valuing what I bring. And then also hearing and seeing what my colleagues, their assessments came out as. It was a very positive experience. And so I was like, gosh, I've got to get trained in this. And so really cool, with this training, it's not just you go to the training, but you also then have to take an assessment, do some coaching, and those people evaluate you. But after the week-long training, our trainer said, please, I know that there's these extra steps of this assessment and of coaching, but he's like, please, please, please do this. He said, because we need all of you to help share the news that every person has talents, every person brings strengths, and the more of us that can do that, the better this world's gonna be. And I'm super excited to share that by June, I will have supported close to 100 people over this last year, helping them identify what their talents and their strengths are. That's pretty awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really cool, isn't it? Now, and I know for me, like when I come home and hear some of this and we talk about this, you often on the other side, people like light up when they find their strengths because everybody loves hearing you actually bring value to the world. You actually are, this is wired into you. Yeah. As we think about strengths, I know, some people, we get fearful, right? I've had conversations, people are like, I don't know if I want to know what they are. I don't think I have them. What if I find out I'm not gifted at all? What would you say to someone that feels like, gosh, I don't know if I have anything? Or what if I find out I'm in the wrong place? I'm in the wrong profession. As an educator, are there certain strengths that I have to have? Or as a salesperson, is he going to tell me I shouldn't be in my job? What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I kind of felt that way because we had done all these other assessments, and I'm like, oh, this is like my day-to-day job. Like, what if they see what my top strengths are and they think, ooh, those are not what a coach should have. But here's the thing, strengths are neutral, and actually through Strengths Finders, there are 34 themes, and we all have all of them. Really what it's doing is helping us see what are those top themes, and then how can we build into those. There is not one grouping that is better than another. A leader can have any type of profile, it's knowing what those are and how you can lean into those. And then how can you lean into partnerships and teams around you to really use everybody's strengths.
And, we've got the Discover Your Strengths workshop coming up here, starting next week. If someone's interested in being a part of that, what are the 2 or 3 things you're going to walk out with as a result of that?
Sure. Well, the big 3 things is, the first one is you're going to learn to name those top talents. Now, here's the thing. You may already have a hunch about what those things are, but what this assessment will do is it will actually name them for you. So it's tangible. It gives you a talking point. It allows you to have conversations with people in your circle, and for them to even speak into you about those. But it gives you these tangible statements in order to really latch on to. And then it's claiming it, right? So it's not just knowing what they are, but it's actually like claiming those. Now, I have to tell you, when I took this assessment, I was like super excited about it, and I'm like showing Kurt, and so my top 5 are up there, and I'm like, oh my word, like, Kurt, these are like so me, don't you think? And he's like, yeah, but how do you get anything done with the top 5? And
a lot of ideas, a lot of positivity, a lot of learning.
I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you saying I don't work? And I'm like, it's the next 5 that get stuff done. And so really with this, it's like helping understand those. Kurt's are a little bit different than mine, right? But yet us being able to like say, yeah, that's me. The cool thing too about claiming it is I started seeing like connections across my my whole life. And so like you'll see connectedness right there. You're probably like, yes. However, here's crazy thing. Like as I look back in my life, I'm like, I remember in 6th grade, I was so wowed by the fact that we were reading a story in language arts that connected with social studies, and I remember coming home telling my family, not another person cared about this, but I was so excited about it. And then fast forward to when we named our children, they all had to have a connection to our family. I mean, by the 4th one, it was getting a little tricky.
And they all had to have an M name.
By the time we got there.
By the time we got there, yeah.
Right? I was pregnant, so I didn't realize that they were all M's till we got too far into it, so we had to stick with that, right? But this whole thread of connectedness,
you're seeing the thread,
has been happening across my whole life. Yeah. And then the last thing is really like aiming what we know. So it's knowing what those top talents are and developing them into strengths, but then owning them, but then aiming them towards things. So aiming them towards what you do, but also in partnership with others. And in teams with other people. And so in order to do that, we have to have practice, though. It's not going to be perfect every single time. But something I did want to mention about that. So Kurt and myself, so if we could get those back up on the screen.
Yeah.
So Kurt,
See, we had the conversation every week, what stories do we get to tell about our family? And Julie got to go in my seat this week and see if it was okay to tell these stories.
That's
right?
exactly right. That's exactly right. So you'll see up here that Kurt and I both have ideation, right? And so the cool thing is, though, it doesn't get lived out quite the same. A friend of ours was saying that, like, these strengths or these talents are like spaghetti, because the way in which they intertwine for each person's unique. So it's not, he's like, it's not like waffles and syrup, it's like spaghetti. And I do love that. So we both have ideation, right, in our top strengths. So we moved into a new house, what was it, 4 years? 5 years ago, not real great numbers, 5 years ago. And I said, I think we need a big table in our dining room. And so I, as a learner, started investigating tables that we could purchase, but then also some table plans in order to make some tables.
That Kurt could build.
Well, no, you told me, listen, Kurt says to me, I don't have time for that. I said, no problem. So I go and I contact some people to see if they'd be interested in making the table. Kurt hears that. Next thing I know, he's got time.
I've got time.
Right?
I'm building a
Because
table.
he's got that competition and that achiever in there, and he is like, I walk into my house, and he is building the table in the dining room, like in the dining room.
Like, it's not going anywhere. Like, you're not, it's staying with the house when we move. Like, it's, I
Correct.
mean, it's not, you can't get out.
We will, when the house is sold, the
It'll
table
stay.
will stay. I said,
table
what
will
are you doing? You said you didn't have time for this. He's like, oh, yes, I do. And there we have a table.
And we have a table, and I love
Right.
building things, and I love achieving things.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of ways this weaves together. As we kind of wrap up, we've got opportunity for strengths. Some of you are signed up. There's still a few spots left. That begins Monday, May 8th. If the dates don't work, you're like, hey, I want to dig into this more, let us know on your connection card. We're going to have another class come. You'll be the first to know. Tell us a little bit about the opportunity for students, because we're going to have an opportunity for students later this summer for parents and students.
Right. So one of the things that has been really amazing for our family is we have had our kids take the Strength Finders assessment. And quite honestly, our parenting, I think, changed when we went through Nurtured Heart, and really valuing and naming what we see in a positive way with our kids. But then this came along, and we had all of our kids take this assessment. And the cool thing about it is that it gives us, again, tangible ways to speak into our kids. But not only that, it helps them to know like who they are and how they're naturally wired. It's not going to help them choose a job, but it is going to help them know who they are. And so it's been really powerful for us, and I can't imagine that it wouldn't be powerful for other families.
And it allows us to help remind them of where they're strong as they make decisions, as they go through things. And we hate that we didn't have it for our older ones like years ago. I mean, sometimes they're like, gosh, you guys were horrible parents when we were young. Like, we really were. We've really grown and
We did
become
screw up a
really
little bit.
good. And so it does give insights to that. So again, if you're interested in that, you can let us know. You'll be the first to know. Hey, let's thank Julie for sharing a bit on strengths. Thank you, Julie. You might be thinking, okay, how do I begin to get a handle on this? Why is this such a big deal? I want to kind of close by telling you just a quick story. This has been really significant for me over the last number of months. In fact, over the last 2-3 years, everybody's jobs change, life's change. We take on different roles. We begin to operate differently based on gaps and the demands of the season. I discovered something over the last 2 months or so. For those of you who've been around here, we did something called the Renew Initiative earlier this spring, and it was really just this burden we felt that God was saying, hey, we need to renew our hearts and our lives and our energies around what God is doing and Jesus is doing in us and in our community and helping other people, find him. And it was just a really powerful experience. And part of that was, renewing our commitment to how we're using our time to fuel what God's doing, how we're using our finances to fuel what God's doing. There's always a funding component. And these are just big seasons when we go through seasons like the Renew Initiative. And, a lot of times there's a lot of heavy lifting, and this was no different. A lot of pastors don't enjoy seasons like this because it's just the demands of raising people up and orienting people around a common vision and pushing forward through things that, we say, gosh, can we go here? God, how do you want to help us get to these places? And I got to the end of those, 6-7 weeks of Renew, and I said to Julie, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel more alive than I felt in years. And I said, but I've been working a lot. I've had a lot of heavy lifting. And she said, well, yeah, it's because of your strengths. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then she showed me this kind of profile right here, which is the domains of the four different areas of strength. And you're not going to be able to read this or see it online. But let me tell you, the orange up there, a lot of my strengths fall in orange, which is influencing. And during the Renew Initiative, a lot of my job was activating people, getting people activated around a mission, inspiring people, challenging people through creative ideas and casting a vision of the future, which are all of the things that are some of my strengths, and then orienting around things that we don't know if they're possible or not, but we're going to push ahead and see if we can leverage our lives to something bigger and beyond ourselves. And I began to realize, she said, this is why you're feeling, so alive. It's like you found the pocket. And it was just like this light bulb went off in my head. And she said, you're actually made for moments like this. And in that moment, I became reacquainted with my strengths because I was able to not only name them, but claim them, say, yes, that is me, but also begin to aim and say, okay, how do I operate more and more out of these domains? And so I've just continued to believe this really is the pathway to becoming the future you, is how do we understand this more and more? So I want to give us a couple questions as we kind of wrap up, a couple next steps, if you will, for you to take this week. You don't have to attend the class to begin to do this. You can if you want to dig deeper. But I just want to give you two questions to begin to think about, okay, what are those areas for me? First question is this: what are the common threads of how you've naturally thought, felt, and behaved over time that bring you energy? You know, what are the things that when you think about certain things or do certain things or you operate in certain realms, you're like, wow, that just, man, I feel like I am in the pocket. I mean, I feel like I am living right there. I'm bringing the best of me to those moments. Just pay attention to those. Write those down. I mean, you probably know what some of those areas are, but those are things that are hardwired talents in you, and you're developing them into strengths or have developed them into strengths. And then, of course, the flip of that is, you know, the second question, which is, you know, what are some of the common threads that are things that, man, they just suck you dry? I mean, you do them and you're just like, oh my gosh, when I have to do this, or when I have to spend a whole day in relationships and engaging with people, it sucks me dry. That means you probably don't have relational strengths. You're wired differently. But pay attention. What are the things that man, when I have to execute or behave or operate in these realms, man, they just suck life out of me. Because those are probably areas that you're just naturally not going to find that you find a lot of life in. And that's okay. It's all part of how God wired us. But I'm telling you, this will begin to hone you in to where you can say, okay, how do I live more out of the things that bring me life? And of course, if you want to sign up for the class, there's the workshop, there's a few spots left. You can scan this QR code, and it begins Monday. We'll get assessments to you, and you can be a part of taking a deeper dive on this. I just believe this is a part of the future you God wants to continue to create in us. How do we live more and more, be intimate, and be aware of our weaknesses, but how do we be intimate with our strengths? Because the you want to be is going to come out of those areas. All right, let's stand and pray for us. We're going to sing one more song. Heavenly Father, thank you for, thank you for hardwiring into us, having a plan, a dream from the very beginning of how you're going to create us, knit us together, the unique ways you're going to shape our lives and build things into us that we can uniquely bring to the world. Some of us, we still are trying to reconcile that in our minds right now. I just pray that you would just bring a confidence to us. Help us, even in this moment, to begin to see some of those places where we bring value. And God, I pray that you would help us to develop those, that you would bring those out, because we know when we do, man, life for us is so much better, and life for others around us is so much better as well. God, I just pray that as we wrestle with, where we bring value, how we bring value, even the question of, God, did you wire those things into us? Maybe for some of us, the first step we need to take in this journey is just recognizing that you did. And God, you do love me, and you are a good God. And in fact, that's why you sent Jesus. And maybe even for you, one of your first steps in leaning into that is just saying, okay, I need to trust you, Jesus, and follow you with my life. And perhaps right now, you've never taken that step, and you're just feeling a tug in your heart to say, that's the step I need to take right now. You can do that right now. There's no magic to the words. God knows the intention of your heart. If you just say, God, I want to know your goodness and grace, and that you are a good God and have good plans for me, and I want to begin to follow you. Just let him know that right now. You can take that step, and as you receive him and his goodness, he will receive you. Father, I just pray that you would bring a confidence. I pray that you bring a fresh wind and blow of your spirit in our lives. Help us to live increasingly more to the places where you've wired us for strength and talents and to bring good into the world. And God, we know when we do that, there's a joy that comes. There's an insurmountable joy that we begin to feel and experience, and we want that. We want that, God. So I pray right now that you would just bring that about, that you would move. We pray these things according to your name and your character and your reputation, Jesus.
There's a radical love that can enter your life, and it's literally waiting for the chance to open your eyes. It's a radical thought to surrender your mind, giving all of your doubt and fear away. Make space for the light.
Hey, if you made a choice today to accept the grace that Jesus brings to all of us by taking a step to trust Jesus as your Savior and leader, we'd love to celebrate that with you. So let us know on your connection card. Now, if you'd like someone to pray with you today, simply text the keyword "need prayer" to 317-834-7373, and our prayer team will be in touch with you. And if you're a giver, I just want to say thank you. You make all of this possible with your generosity through the Joy Box. And if you want to become a giver, you can go to the Give button at the top of the screen or crosspointweb.org/give, and know that when you do that, you are empowering this message and all the goodness that comes out of this place, and you're investing in making heaven more crowded. On behalf of all of us, thank you. Thanks for joining us today. We can't wait to see you next time for part 4 of The Future You.